Thank you. Kevin Johnson is a recent December 2024 graduate of Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas, with a PhD in anthropology. Anthropology advances the study of humanity. The cultural anthropology subfield focuses on human culture. Kevin received a BS in mechanical engineering from Texas A&M University in 1984 and an MS in mechanical engineering from the University of Texas at Austin in 1987. At Texas A&M in the 1980s, Kevin was a member of the Black Awareness Committee, the MSC BAC Gospel Choir, which members later named Voices of Praise in 1982, and the National Society of Black Engineers. While working in the petrochemical business as an engineer for several years, Kevin partook of studies in the social sciences. In August 2015, he completed an MA in sociology and an MA in cross-cultural studies in December 2018 at the University of Houston, Clear Lake. He also completed a graduate certificate in women's studies from the University of Houston, Clear Lake in August 2015, in African American Studies from the University of Houston Central Campus in May 2017, and in Africana Studies from Texas A&M University in May 2022. He is currently a member of several TAMU, is that how you say it? TAMU student organizations, Woodson BAC, VOP, NSBE, Black Graduate Student Association, Native American and Indigenous Student Organization, Roundtable Talks, and Students of Eastern Africa, also serving as the advisor. Kevin is a supporter of the following community organizations: Nigerian American Multicultural Council, EWE, Association of Houston, Society for Africans in the Diaspora, and Dominica Houston Association. He is a member of a few academic honor societies as well, including mechanical engineering, sociology, Black studies, and anthropology. So Kevin, again, thank you so much for agreeing to do this, and the floor is yours.
Welcome, everyone. I've had the pleasure of meeting a wonderful young lady along the way when I was doing my research named Wendy Goodlow. Actually, one of the first people that I met before I started my research project, which began in earnest in 2021. So what we'd like to do is, we've had a little bit of introduction to me, and we'll start with, after the introduction, go to an overview of the dissertation project that I did, which incorporated some participant observation work and also some semi-structured interviews that I conducted with various members of the Black Seminole community. And you'll see a map of some of the sites that I visited, and you'll see some summaries of some of the interviews that were conducted and some of the things that stood out for me in the course of doing this research. And after that, I'd like to do a few reflections on how this has impacted me as a person and as a researcher. And then after that, see if you all have any questions, any follow-up discussion that you would like to have. I've attended some of these monthly sessions in the past, and so I have a sense of how they go. I know it's a little bit informal, and that you're welcome to ask questions if you need to along the way. Increase his volume. Okay, I don't know how to do that. I'm not really sure how to do that. Let's see if we can figure that out. Let's see.
You might want to try from your computer, maybe. Is it already up to full volume?
Hold on a second here. I've got to go to my my sound settings. Okay, sound settings, and it should. That's telling me about the speaker side, and the input side should be the microphone. Okay. What is going on? Oh, it should be the headset.
Yeah, probably.
How's that? How's it sound now?
That sounds like it got louder. Does that sound louder to y'all?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. For some reason, it was not understanding to use my headset for the sound. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for that help. And let's see here. I need to share screen, so bear with me while I do that. I want to share screen and I want to share sound. And let's see, I want to share this screen. And let's see. Okay, can people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so let's go ahead and get this slideshow started. Why does it look different? Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is the introductory slide. I need to move stuff around on my screen so I can see what's going on here. So the project basically is a comparative study in one sense, in that there's two different sets of groups of people. I said sets of group because one I'm referring to as Afro-transnational. That's specific to people who have connections with Ethiopia and Eritrea and East Africa. The reason for that being is that early on in my social science studies, I needed to do a research design. And so the project that I selected was to look at the Ethiopian Eritrean community in Houston, to look at how their culture and identity is being navigated there and understood and expressed there. The other thing that happened is I'm also interested in Afro-Indigenous people. These are people of African descent who are connected in some way to the Native American groups, the indigenous people of the Americas who have ancestors that were here in the Americas prior to the 1400s and 1500s, and how they have interacted with people of African descent who appeared after the beginning of the colonization of North America by European people of European descent. And specifically, I was looking at what's sometimes referred to as the five tribes or five civilized tribes: the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Seminole, and the Muskogee, which are often called Creek. And the reason I'm interested in that is because, and I'm not 100% sure, but it is possible, according to my family oral tradition, that we may be part Choctaw from the Louisiana era back to the 1700s to 1800s. So I want to learn more about that. And let's see if I can figure out how to advance the slide. Okay, it's not advancing. Okay, there we go. Okay, so some of the things that come up with this research project, when we start talking about race and ethnicity, race is more aligned in the way it is talked about with sort of the genetic aspect of a person's heritage in terms of where their parents from. For overarching point of view, I would say you have people of ancestry from the indigenous Americas, you have people from the European, and you have people from the African continent, mostly West and Central Africa, that are involved, as well as, because I'm doing a comparative study, we're also looking at people from Eastern Africa. And sociology, not as much as anthropology, looks at social identities, including construction of race and ethnicity. Sociology does that a little bit as well. Our governments, when we talk about governments, we talk about state governments, federal governments, and also our indigenous national governments. Sometimes they create these racial and ethnic identities. These become official categories by which people are understood, regulated, and interacted with. And so for this research project, I want to look at how Black or African American people, how their sense of history and social cultural experience is expressed in the United States, especially in the United States. But as we'll see, that you can't necessarily draw a boundary around some of these cultural groups, because if you say the United States, you may find that they have members of the community that are extended beyond that. But the whole thing is to explore the idea that there are many different types of experiences and the ways that identity is understood by people who are at a high level in this country, designated as Black or African American. And we also want to look at the fact that, in addition to that, sometimes the overarching history of Black or African American people in the United States is related to the time frame of 1619, and then it goes on to a trajectory that includes the ending of slavery with the 13th Amendment or so, in 1860s after the Civil War. So you look at 1619, it's often referred to as the beginning of the enslavement of Black people in the United States, and then it ends with just after the Civil War. Okay, so just to give an idea of some of the government forms, I've looked at the state of Texas, and I've looked at, which is where I live, and I've looked at the United States government. If you look at the U.S. government forms, the Social Security number application, it has the terms ethnicity, either Hispanic or Latino, and the race category, which there's several boxes that you can select there. And so for race, you can select multiple boxes, including Black or African American. And then for ethnicity, you can select Hispanic or Latino or not, but it's voluntary to choose those boxes, okay? If you look at the permanent resident application, so this is something that people who are migrants would be faced with if they're trying to get permanent residence in the United States. You see that it asks about ethnicity, whether you're Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino, and then it has several categories of boxes that you can select for race. And lastly, you see that for the Texas driver's license, you have, you must select race and ethnicity. If you don't select something, then your application will not go through. I tried that, it doesn't go through. They will say, you need to put something here. Okay, so those categories are on documents that impact how we live our lives and what sorts of things we have access to, like a driver's license, permission to stay in the country legally or permanently, permanent residence cards, and also Social Security. It's hard to do much without a Social Security number, although that form says you can select race and ethnicity voluntarily, but it's still data that is gathered. Okay, so the aim of the study is to see what we can learn about Black identity in the United States, Black identity and culture, by exploring two groups. And I mentioned Afro-transnational and then the Afro-Indigenous groups. And so we do that, and noting that part of the significance or part of what's interesting about these two groups, that an increasing number of people that are Black or African American in the United States, increasing percentage as well, are foreign born or a descendant of recent immigrant. And when I say recent immigrant, we're saying a parent or grandparent is from Africa or some other country. So Africa and the Caribbean. It turns out that the Caribbean has quite a few people who are migrating to the United States, and more recently, Africa is sending lots of people to where we have about 1 out of 5, if you think about it, of the Black or African American people are foreign born or a recent or descendant of a recent immigrant. And when we look at Afro-Indigenous, we look at the early 1900s, there were over 20,000 people classified as freedmen. So these would be those formerly enslaved people who were enslaved among the tribes that we mentioned earlier. And so there's 20,000 then, but then what's happening more recently, and if you look at, for example, the Cherokee Nation, their Supreme Court in 2021 opened that citizenship to descendants of those freedmen. And so if they can show that their ancestor was listed on the Dawes Rolls, which came out in the late 1800s, early 1900s, if the Dawes Roll shows that their ancestor was a freedman, then they can apply for citizenship as Cherokee. There are two categories. There's a freedman category on there, and then there's a by blood. And then what you have is that in some cases they're really both, but they only have the freedman box marked, and so that was a problem for them to apply for citizenship. That has been changed here more recently in the last couple of years. And lastly, looking at some data that just came out this summer, there are over something like 468,000 Cherokee Nation citizens. This is out of Oklahoma, and of those, you're seeing that we have over 15,000 or so that are freedmen descent. And that number seems to be going up. So one of the things that I critique is that some of us in the United States have heard of the Trail of Tears, and I have put it this slide trails because there was more than one trail. It was not everybody lined up single file. We're going to march from Georgia to Indian Territory. It was not like that. You had different points in time and different geographic locations that these removals were happening. This started in the 1830s. This was part of the Indian removal era. And so this particular map, and I've got like the link down here, Trail of Tears map, is that it involved various trails. And so you see different colors representing the different tribes in terms of their trajectory. And one thing interesting is you note that the Seminole were removed partially over water from Florida to New Orleans over water and then up the Mississippi River and then over into Indian Territory. So that's something that's really not as well known, but there's many different routes that were taken by many different tribes over different points in time. And this is something that is leading me to say that maybe it's trails of tears that are all part of the Indian removal era involving the tribes of the Southeast. So the overarching question we had is, how do Afro-Indigenous and Afro-transnational individuals navigate race and ethnic identity? And what are the elements of their culture that you can see if you were to interact among these groups? Some of the theories, these are some of the social theories. Interestingly, some of the social theories are created by legal scholars such as Kimberly Crenshaw, the idea of intersectionality, that your identity is based upon class, gender, race, sexuality, and so on and so forth. There's a couple of other theories I came across a couple of years ago, Doolin and Broglio. This is the idea that you have an African or Black migrant that's navigating between their home country culture and sort of the Black identity. An added additional component to that is in triple quandary when you say you're looking at Black identity, you look at mainstream culture, and you're looking at having a minority identity. So you have multiple aspects of yourself that you're navigating as an immigrant, as a Black person, as a person in the mainstream United States, and these things are being navigated. That's on the sort of psychological level. Intersectionality was something I came across because I wanted to use a term that was looking at the internal variations, the internal diversity that exists among people of Black or African American descent, or identity rather. And so this theory that I came across was a legal scholar came across the idea of people who are transitioning from maleness to femaleness, or maybe they have both, or they identify as having both in them. This relates to transgender, transsexual type identities. And so that represents a special class of person that has this blend of maleness and femaleness based upon, they may have surgery, they may have some chemistry going on that they're doing. And they also just in terms of how they identify naturally. So I propose to use the idea of Afro-intersectionality. So what this is really meaning is that I want to look at the internal diversity, especially the idea that a person can be two races at the same time or can be two or more ethnicities at the same time. You can be indigenous and you can be Black or African American, and you can be, yeah, I'm Black, but I'm also dealing with African American culture and identity, but I'm also dealing with being of a culture from another part of Africa or the Caribbean. So this is the purpose of my using this sort of term, is that there's internal diversity, and this is just a way to discuss it. The methodology, we had participant observation interviews that I mentioned, then there were some museum visits that I made, such and such as that, and collaborating with groups such as CISCA to help put on events and things of that nature. Now, institution review boards, this is necessary at institutions such as Texas A&M before you begin research with human subjects. This is to protect the people that you are interacting with, maintain their privacy, confidentiality, those sorts of things, and the people can pull out the study and stop an interview if they want to. So because I was dealing with people who may be enrolled members of indigenous nations, that's 5 different review boards that I need to go through. Not all of the indigenous nations have formal review boards, but I have to contact somebody to say it's okay to talk to their citizens or not. In addition to the review board for Texas A&M. So I had to do about the equivalent of 6 contacts in order to begin the study. All right, so we're going to move on. Let's see. I wanted to show you all briefly some of the places that I visited. That's in this table. There's Texas, there's Oklahoma, there's Florida, and there's Arkansas. I made one visit to Arkansas. And then there were some virtual visits that were made for Coahuila, Mexico. There's a community of Seminoles, often referred to as Negros Mascogos, in Coahuila, Mexico. So I wanted to show you what it was like when I went to the field. And this is sort of the virtual field. I'll just spend about a few seconds on this one. Hopefully it works. Let's see how it works. It should put up a video. Okay, let's see how this works. I haven't tested it here in a while. Okay, excuse that. Got a commercial interruption. All right. Or maybe my last time, I don't know. This may be my last time. This may be my last time. This may be my last time. Okay, so you see that, and then it begins.
Muy buenas tardes, el Laboratorio Audiovisual del Centro de Investigación.
All right, so then you see it goes into Spanish at some point. And so I spent some time with those kinds of presentations where I had to switch over and try to use as much of my Spanish skills, because some of the discussions were not, they didn't have an interpreter, they didn't have a translation. So, but this is part of what you see when you set out to do Afro-Indigenous and you come across Seminole, and then some of them live in Mexico, and you have to at least engage that aspect of it. And as we'll see, there's some Seminole there in other places as well. So just to give you an idea of that, we have some more. So when I began my study, it was supposed to begin in 2020. I was going to Minneapolis, of all places, but COVID happened, the pandemic happened, and so the annual soccer tournament, which also incorporates a festival, was canceled. I had full funding to go, plane ticket, hotel, meals, everything were paid for, but it was canceled due to COVID. And so in the interim, once we came out of the lockdown, we were into 2021. And so by that time, I had talked to a potential committee member to incorporate the Afro-Indigenous part of the study. So that's how that came to be. And then lo and behold, this is not the picture that I took in 2021. I wish I had taken it. But on the right, you see that there's a display from the museum that's in Brackettville, operated by the CISCA. And in this display case, and Wendy was giving me a tour of the museum, and I came across this display case. It's got trophies from the Carver High School, where their segregated school system was part of what the descendants of the Black Seminoles, Seminole Indian Scouts, had to contend with. They had some trophies there. There's some military artifacts in here as well. But then there was this bottom left, there's this green, yellow, red hat that I didn't understand what that was. It reminded me of Ethiopia. So I asked about that, and sure enough, it was donated by a friend of CISCA. Named Haile Gerima, who made a very famous movie called Sankofa. We can talk about that maybe a little later, but I was very surprised to see something representing Ethiopia and Black Seminole in the same display case in the same museum. That was fascinating to me. Something else I saw years later in 2023 at the annual Seminole Maroon Family Reunion in Florida. There were several different cities, West Palm Beach and Jupiter and some other places that we had. It was a 5-day conference, but in the centerfold, in the center pages, I noticed that it had prayers that were indigenous prayers on the left. One is, I think, a Lakota. The other one is not known. Then on the right, you see there's a symbol, the G Yame, representing an Adinkra symbol from Ghana, West Africa. Then you've got some prayers from Yoruba people from Nigeria. Then you have terms like Umoja, which is Kiswahili in Eastern and Central Africa. You find Swahili spoken. Then you see from Southern Africa. You see this word Ubuntu, representing the idea that humanity is such that a person is a person through other people, that I am because we are, therefore I am, that we're tied together. We exist as people, not as individuals, but we exist as a people group. That's one way to look at it. And so I was surprised. So what this was showing me is that there's multiple parts of Africa represented, and there's multiple indigenous traditions that are represented at some of these functions. And you'll see that there's a little bit of inter-tribal relationship, and there's multiple ethnic groups that you see represented from Africa, and some of the symbology that is shown in a program such as this. And then also, just briefly, you'll see I've got to go here because I don't want to take too much time. Let's see, it should be another video coming up. See how this works.
Guys, do something special for your wife this year with a gift.
Always a commercial.
We've been told about slavery.
Oh, you may know this young lady.
It's not just one story. It wasn't just people came and waited for Lincoln to free them. There were people that as soon as they hit
I don't know why it's not letting me.
this unknown country, they said, we don't like this. Let's figure out a way to make this better. So I think that story is important.
General Thomas S. Jessup commanded the U.S. troops in the Second Seminole War. They were captured and forced to travel to a reservation in Oklahoma, a result of the Indian Removal Act. The journey would be called the Trail of Tears.
The Seminole Wars were very prominent, and we were unconquerable. So we are still here now teaching the next generation why it's important that we celebrate our ancestors this way.
Anastasia Pittman's ancestors stayed in Oklahoma. Others found homes in Texas, Mexico, and the Bahamas. Some of their distant relatives still live in Florida.
Our history.
Okay, so I just wanted to show that briefly. It didn't do exactly the way I wanted to, but that's all right. So we're going to move back to the presentation. Okay, so that was from Florida. It was on the news, and that's one thing about doing research nowadays is that everybody has a camera. People can take videos. That was done by actually a traditional news program, but everybody's taking pictures. So as you see, that is also true at this. Another event that I went to in Brackettville, 2024, early this year, and also last year, there's some of the pictures that are taken at some of the sites that are visited. On the left, this one was Seminole Days 2024. This was at the Canyon State Park, which was sort of north and west of Brackettville. So we took a picture there. It was a fascinating trip. Then the other was at the Seminole Days the year before that. This was in Brackettville. This is the same site where the museum is located. This is kind of on the picnic ground area. And you see that the lady is playing a saxophone, and she was fantastic, by the way. All right, so we're going to move on, show you some other stuff. So some of the other events that I went to, the Ethiopian Eritrean site, there's an Africa Day that happens around the May 25th, which is the founding for the African Union. This is just one of the displays of some cuisine from Ethiopia. I think this is just simile. I don't think there's really coffee in here. I'm not sure. But anyway, coffee is a big thing in Ethiopia. Coffee was first made into a beverage in Ethiopia. And so that's a big thing. It has a whole ceremony that comes with it. These are some of the other people who were at that same reception on the left. These ladies here. There's some symbology here that you see the lady on the right in kind of the red, yellow, green, blue. That's representing Eritrea, that little laurel wreath. Gold symbol is representing one of the symbols on the flag of Eritrea. And the other ladies, you may see a stylized cross that they have, like the necklaces. Those are stylized crosses which represent Orthodox Christianity. And then the green, yellow, red is the symbol basically of Ethiopian identity that you see represented quite often. On the right, this was a festival I went to in 2023. This was the soccer festival that I was able to attend. This was outside of Dallas. So lo and behold, I ran into a couple of friends. And so we posed for this picture. And again, you see the green, yellow, red flags represented in the back. There was something in here I want to show y'all too. Let's see. I think I may have one more video after this. Hopefully this plays better. Okay, so really what I want to show there is that you have represented at a festival like that various ethnic groups in Ethiopia, and that was Guragi. That was one of the ethnic groups that's in Ethiopia. Yeah, they have their own music, they have their own dance. And so you go to Ethiopian festival, you may see multiple ethnic groups, multiple languages, multiple dance styles, multiple types of attire that are on display. All right. So this one is the last one that has a video with it, if it comes up. Let's see. All right. So this was a event that I went to called We Are Cherokee. This is an exhibit for the Cherokee freedmen descendants. This one was located in, let's see, where was this? Okay, this one was at Tahlequah. This was at the Cherokee Nation's National Museum in 2023. I want to show you a little bit of this and then we'll move on.
Of those who were enslaved, and that's one of the great tragedies of not only our history, but every society that enslaved people. I know one of their names, by the way. One of their names was Prince. We know a little bit more about Prince. Prince gained his freedom in 1834. This was before most of his fellow slaves earned their freedom, as we know the story would go on. He went on to marry a Cherokee by blood, and he is the fourth great-grandfather of the chief of the Cherokee Nation.
Okay, just want y'all to hear that from the chief himself. All right, let's see if I can figure out how to make this next slide. All right, hold on. Okay, there we go. So yeah, so there were some speeches and a good poem that was done there. Also at the end of that particular video. The other thing happened is that exhibit was moved to Fort Smith, Arkansas in 2024. So I was at the opening ceremony for that occasion. And so on the left, you see some of the examples of what the Cherokee Nation freedmen rolls look like. And so there's a Frances McNack who actually used this information, was able to successfully enroll herself and her children in the Cherokee Nation back in the early 1900s. But not all of the Cherokee freedmen and their descendants were as successful as she was. So on the right, what I found here at Texas A&M University at our library, one of our archive libraries, I found that there is a set of files containing Cherokee freedmen applications that were refused because the people were not able to get back to Indian Territory within the window that was prescribed for them. And because of that, you see that they have these files from this is a Fanny Van that says refused, and inside the document it gives kind of what the declaration looked like. Okay, so that's interesting in terms of looking at citizenship for the freedmen and freedmen descendants. All right, lastly on that, we have more of the recent things that have happened with the Cherokee Nation. This Marilyn Van is shown in blue in both of these. She's the lady with the glasses on, testifying before the Senate committee on the left, and then more recently in February of this year, the chief that you saw in the video, Chief Hoskins Jr., did an executive order to further strengthen the opportunities and rights of freedmen to make sure that they have equal privileges, equal rights to all Cherokee Nation citizens. All right, so interviews, I'm gonna move on real quickly. It's like more people are joining. All right, so I had, a few more females than males in the study, particularly with the Afro-Indigenous population, Seminole, Cherokee, Choctaw, and such, and Chickasaw. I had a few more of those in males, and you see the age ranges are sort of scattered, maybe skewed a little bit to, it's kind of scattered. So some of the themes that came out, I won't read everything, but let's just read the top one, is that looking at the context was one of the themes that I came up with, is context. Just understanding the community, you have to understand a little bit about the history. So one person says, I'm Ethiopian, but I'm a Somali, if that makes any sense, because I'm Somalian. Ethiopia has a bunch of different cultures that we stated before, but yet 84 different languages. And these are different languages for different ethnic, such cultural groups that are prevalent within Ethiopia. In other words, Ethiopia has about 84, 85 different languages that are spoken, and you have the same or more numbers of different ethnic groups. And so one of those ethnic groups is Somali, located next to the country of Somalia, but on the eastern portion of Ethiopia, you find the Somali region. It is named Somali region, and the people there speak Somalian, and culturally they're Somali. Okay, so looking at Afro-Indigenous, let's see. We had a quote here that we know our ancestors came on the Trail of Tears. We don't know before the trail just because there aren't records. The natives didn't keep records, and the trail, they, you know, when you landed in Oklahoma, they renamed the people to English names, so everybody got renamed. We don't have the oral history of older names to trace back farther, but yeah, it goes back to the trail, which I guess would be, for me, that would be 2, 3, over 6 generations back. So again, if we look at the broader Black or African American category, these two statements would seem maybe perplexing unless you knew that I was doing a study that was looking at these two groups. Because as an African American myself, I don't know why I had any ancestors on the Trail of Tears or Trails of Tears, any of the Trails of Tears. And I'm not Somali. I couldn't claim that. I don't know a word of Somali. But that's just to show, in order to appreciate the amount of diversity we have, these are the sorts of things that you will find out. Okay, so voice, something I value a lot, being to you, be in public, be in the street, see someone, recognize that they are Eritrean as well. It's just like an immediate connection. It's like, hi, or salam. Are you Habesha? Are you Eritrean? And then that way they can just bond just right there. And even within 5 or 10 minutes of conversations, that you're able to maybe find even a mutual friend, somebody that you know in common if you're Eritrean. And then if you look over here at the Afro-Indigenous, you see, I think when at times people approach me, they seem, oh, well, you know, I'm Cherokee. And we probably have or share something in common and blah, 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 blah. Like, no, man, I'm Seminole. Like, we grew up in Florida. We're over here. We have completely different customs. We probably share some of the same oppressions and atrocities against us, but in terms of like core culture, oftentimes that's different. So again, even if you look at Afro-Indigenous, there's different experiences, different memories, different histories that come to bear. And this comes out in the interviews. Just say under struggle, under Afro-Indigenous part, I say, when people try to put me in a box, this is when you go to talk about your race and ethnicity. When people try to put me in a box, it also hurts me when they don't think I belong in the box that they've checked for themselves. In other words, you select Black and they say, oh, no, you're not Black, you're Native American. If you select Native American, say, no, you're not Native American, you're Black. This sorts of things happen. Okay, so it's just a struggle just to get the identity together. Okay, and lastly, let's see here what I want to read. Okay, so under dream, it's the idea of, I guess for America, a lot of Ethiopians kind of like coming here because they want like a better life for their kids. So for example, my mom, she's still full Ethiopian citizen. She refuses to become American citizen. I'm the last child. The moment I graduate, she's moving back to Ethiopia. That's where her family is, and different things like that. The same thing with my dad. So what they're saying is people are using the United States as a way to get education for their kids and things like that. Okay. And then there's a hope. I'm just going to read this one over here. I hope that one day soon that all Cherokee citizens, any descent, will have the same equal rights and recognition. Those of Black heritage kept the freedman title, and it was to bring separation. So I'm hoping that in the future that being a freedman does not mean separation from Cherokee rights. Okay. So you get the idea that the gender roles are changing with time. That's what these next couple of things are saying. It's kind of more equal now. I'll just go through real briefly. I did some Venn diagrams. I'll go through really briefly that talk about your self-reported race and ethnicity, how you report for yourself, what the government records say, what people mistake you for, and then what other people perceive you to be. So what I looked at is Afro-Indigenous, Afro-transnational people, and looked at what they told me during their interviews as far as what they identify as and the various categories where they overlap is in the intersection. So mostly they self-identify in common as Black or African American. But if you look at government records, some are listed as Caucasian or white, either a government official, a police officer, somebody has ascribed them that identity. What they're mistaken for in common sometimes is Hispanic or Mexican. Ethiopian people get mistaken for Hispanic or Mexican. They get mistaken for Indian or South Asian Indian a lot. And then people mostly, have in
Salvation.
common, they call it
Wow.
white.
Oh my
What's
God.
that? Okay, I think somebody's watching television. Okay, so interesting. One thing I'll show is that on these two, when you look at cultural spaces, like where do you find your culture represented, there was nothing was in common, which was strange. Look at artistic representation. You see drawings and paintings. That's very generic. But you may see like Lalibela, like an architectural structure, like Lalibela, the carved churches that are in Ethiopia out of the rock. And then you have murals that are like in Coahuila, Mexico. Then you look at arrows and cups and earrings. So things are not very common between them. The dances, when you look at the dances, Esquista is something a lot of people mentioned to me. It's like a lot of neck and shoulder movement in that dance. And then for Afro-Indigenous, many people from the Coahuila side, I think, that have the cumbia and the two-step, those things, but not in common with the people from Ethiopia. But what is interesting is that you talk about festivals and holidays, and Christmas is something in common. However, Christmas and for the indigenous people is celebrated 25th of December. For the Orthodox Christians, it is celebrated on January 7th. So they're not even celebrating on the same day. So just to give you another idea of the diversity. Okay, so getting to the end of all of that. So what we're saying is that Black ethnicities in the studies include, like I said, Afro-Indigenous people, the Ethiopian Eritrean, Cherokee Seminole, and all those names are the ethnicities and that they self-identify with, many of these participants in the interviews. And these identities are sometimes mistaken and misunderstood or just overlooked by others. Black culture includes many people and many stories. So you got the Trails of Tears, you got different languages, different religions, you have different migrations, you have different home countries. And what I would suggest is that if we have future research, you should look at Afro-transnationalism and Afro-indigeneity in conversation with trans-border issues. So you have the US-Mexico border crossing, especially for the Black Seminole. And then you have the US-Canada border crossing by the people who are from Ethiopia and Eritrea. Sometimes they have it's Ethiopian Sports Federation of North America, and there's an Eritrean one as well. But they say North America because sometimes they have it in Canada, in Toronto. So basically their identity is split between the US and Canada. Then also with the Seminoles, that there's a relationship with the Bahamas. So you have to look at, even though you try to draw a boundary around the US, you'll find that the community extends beyond that boundary. You literally just can't box people in. All right, technology we talked about before. The photos, audio, video stuff is available online. A lot of that, you can just use that data to help yourself. Also, streaming services, just like what we're doing right now, are available. Gender roles, what I found is that access to higher education is pretty equal and open in the United States for women and men as well. And you'll find that both are working outside the home in many cases. That's becoming more and more the case. I would suggest for the Cherokee Nation that there be a survey done to get more information on how the Cherokee Freedmen descendants are interpreting their identity and their relationship with the Cherokee Nation. And let's see what I have here. Okay, on the research level, academic level, I was thinking that if you want to study identity construction and culture, that social psychology may be employed. I'm thinking it must be employed. You must look at the psychology that's going on with the individual as that individual is interacting with their group, whatever they call their in-group, and also how they're interacting with people who are not necessarily in their in-group. The social psychology is part of what goes in some of the theories that I mentioned earlier. And I think that was the last slide. Yes. So that was that. So I'm going to stop sharing unless y'all want me to share something else and stop sharing. Okay. All right. So that was basically a shortened version of what I did for my dissertation work. I see some names on here, people that I recognize, so that's cool too. So that was my presentation. Before we go and open it up, let's see. I had, I wanted to do something. Let's see. I wanted to do this just to show you a couple of things that I got as artifacts. Okay, so this bag, okay, it's not going to come in focus. It's not going to do that. So anyway, this was a bag that we got for the 2023 uh, Seminole Maroon reunion in Florida. It was nice and neat, and I just want to show you real briefly. I've got some other books and stuff here. Maybe somebody asks a question, I might get into those, but I want to show you. This was the booklet that we had that I mentioned earlier, and the page that really just blew my mind. I want to show you that. It was this page. You know, it's not going to focus just right, but you get the idea. So this was that the artifacts that you collect are also part of the data that you can use in discussing what is going on. Let's see. Yeah. The other part of I want to share with you is my personal, I guess, investment in being an engineer and then being a social science, because I get asked a lot, well, why did you switch? Well, I didn't switch. I didn't become a mechanical engineer, and I didn't become an anthropologist. That's not something that I sought out. It sought me, the best way I can explain it. It found me. I mean, okay, so for the engineering part, I would say I was probably influenced in the late 60s and early 70s with all the Apollo missions and all the space travel, and being a scientist was something really cool. And I think that had an impact on me. You're, first grade, and you see these guys bouncing around on the television screen, and they're on the moon. I mean, that's pretty cool. And so that was an influence. But before that, in April 4th of 1968, when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and I was in a new household, and I was told by my new step siblings that were older than I that Dr. King did a lot for Black people. They said that several times. They're watching the TV, they're crying, they're sobbing like somebody in the family had died. And I didn't understand what was going on because I'd never heard of this person. I knew it had to be somebody important. And whatever it was that he was about, it had something to do with Black people. And I said, somebody says he was great for Black people. One more time, I'm gonna ask a question. So sure enough, somebody asked a question. I don't remember who it was. And I said, what is a Black person? And lo and behold, to my shock and surprise, I found out that I was a Black person. And they were like, well, I'm a Black person. Well, why am I a Black person? Oh, because of your skin. I said, but I'm brown. I mean, this is brown. When I go to a coloring book, I take out the brown color, and that's how I color something that looks like me. I know that's brown. The Black one, no, I use that for my hair. So it's because my hair is Black. Is that what makes me Black? So as a kindergartner, I asked that question. And as a 60-something-year-old, I'm still asking that question. What is a Black person? Based on what we just saw, what is a Black person? If you were to define a Black person, would you include the Trails of Tears? Would you include a dance called Esquista? Would you include Kuragi language? Would you include a lot of things? Even coffee. I mean, yeah, maybe you include coffee, but everybody includes coffee nowadays. But what about a coffee ceremony? Well, maybe not so much that. So my point is that I am fascinated by the idea that we have this term Black, and we assume that we've got it neatly bounded between 1619 and, in the Civil War, Reconstruction, post-Reconstruction, fight for civil rights, post-civil rights, and whatever it is you call it that we're in right now, that fits everybody. I'm saying it's not one size fits all. There's overlaps, like you see in some of those diagrams I show you, some of those Venn diagrams, you see some overlap. But then you see a lot of stuff that's outside of that intersection for these groups of people. So what I wanted to do is learn more about myself. And here's the thing, here's my paradigm as an anthropologist, is that if you want to find out how you're different from somebody else or some other group, study how you're the same. If you want to find out how you're the same, study how you're different. And so my idea was, well, study how you're the same and different and see what happens. And then once you do that, you find these surprises. Like, you know, you go to study Black Seminoles and you see this Ethiopian hat sitting in the display. It's just no, and the killer part about it, why is that hat in display? Because of this guy from Ethiopia. Well, why was he there? Why was that person interested in Black Seminole? I mean, just because he's from Ethiopia doesn't mean he's not genuinely interested in the Seminoles, right? He is. I mean, my understanding, when he can fill y'all in on what's happening with him, Haile Garima. But yeah, so that is it. And the more that I get into trying to understand what it means to be Black, the more I realize how complex it is, because you got to include the Caribbean, you got to include all parts of Africa, all parts of the Caribbean, all parts of South America, all parts of North America. And it's not, okay, for example, I'm just going to make this one thing, then I'll open up for questions, because something really blew me away, not even related to this project, but it's part of what drives me to keep going. Is U.S. Virgin Islands is part of the United States. Is the first part of U.S. Virgin Islands is United States. And I was talking to a Caribbean guy who was from the Virgin Islands, and I think I asked him a question about, you know, who did the Virgin Islands belong to before it became part of U.S.? And he said, yeah, I think it was Denmark. I said, you mean Dutch? You mean Holland? You mean the Netherlands, right? No, I think it was Denmark. So he gets on his phone, because people can look up stuff. He looks up stuff on the phone, and then lo and behold, it's Denmark. And lo and behold, the Emancipation Day they celebrate is not 1865, it's 1848, and it's July 3rd. And it's like, whoa, you're just blowing my mind. So we have a lot that is going on. And the more that we dig into it, the more that I dig into it, the more fascinating I get. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. Okay, that's what I had, Wendy. So if you can moderate, or do you need to make you the host again, or whatever, that's good.
Oh, no, you don't have to make me the host, but I can moderate any questions.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Yeah, this was amazing. Anybody have any questions for Kevin? You can unmute yourself and ask yourself. That's what I would really love for you to do. Or you can put it in the chat and I can just read it out if you like.
Michael, you got a question? My son Michael's on here. He told me, hey, Dad. Michael, you got a question? He's watching.
Oh, he's thinking.
This is Miko. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, Miko. Hey, we can hear you.
Hey, good evening.
Is this the Miko that I know?
I mean, how many Mikos do you know, first of all?
Let me see. I got to count one.
Exactly. So it is that one. Apologies. It's the holidays. I cut the back half of this presentation, so I missed the beginning. So I apologize if my comment has already been covered to some extent. Yeah, but I've talked with Kevin up to this point, and I think I might have been one of the people he interviewed as part of his dissertation. And I just want to comment on something that I noticed growing up community-wise. So I guess it's important that I make a note that part of Kevin's studies, that he studied us, right, as Black Indigenous, and he studied Africa, particularly like Eastern Africa a lot. Ironically, one of my best friends is East African, is Eritrean. And so I know a lot of the stuff that Kevin was talking about, I could relate to through that kinsmanship with him. And so growing up with that friend, I met him in college, and I got to know his community a lot in East Africa. And he was, I guess, second generation, right? His parents moved here, and then he was born here. And you know, I got to know their community, and their community was so close. They were all immigrants coming over. As they got here, they all like dominated an apartment complex, or dominated a couple streets in a neighborhood, in a whole block. And they all lived together. All the parents knew each other. They helped raise each other. It was very much a little mini village of Eritreans, and they all lived in Dallas, right? And there's certain communities that were very like centered and dense of their community. And I honestly used to be jealous of it. I was like, man, y'all all know each other. You can go to this apartment complex and like everyone there you damn near know. I was like, the closest thing I have to that is Bracketville, where if I go there and I see any Black people, I just assume I'm related to them. But we don't have that. We don't still have that same connectedness that you all do, right? You know everyone, everyone's parents, you know, knows all the kids, and it's very much a village raising all the kids. And, you know, it really opened up my eyes to that. You know, I bet my family, Bracketville, Nacimiento, Del Rio, I bet we were like that. We're just a couple generations beyond where my friend is. they're only second generation, so they're still close knit. But their kids, and then particularly their kids, I bet are going to be more like we are today, and start assimilating a lot more into America. And you know, this is more of a comment and less of a question, but I guess the comment or question, the things I would open up to Kevin to speak to a bit is, you know, I think a lot of that's happening with assimilation. As you hit a culture, as you hit a country, and you're away from your home ground, you start to assimilate to the region and the cultures around you. And we've seen a lot with our people from Gullah Geechee to Florida to Oklahoma to Mexico to Texas. We've adapted, and there's a lot of differences between, you know, where we first landed in South Carolina, North Carolina. My question is there, Kevin, in your research, have you ever seen like communities, I think regress is the wrong word because it has a negative connotation, but like readapt and refound that close-knitness, that close-knit tie of a community? Like, again, we're a couple of generations now down the line from where my friend is, that's Eritrean, and we're very assimilated, but I see him going the same way. Do you ever see a reversal of that, where the communities come back together and start close knitting, or is it just a natural human experience culturally to just slowly assimilate and start spreading out more and kind of losing that close knit community?
Well, I think I see what you're saying. If you look at other immigrant groups that have maybe migrated for a longer period of time, more generations, say Japanese Americans, for example.
Right.
You may still find that they have those connections, but they're not necessarily limited to the United States. That's the other thing. Yeah, they came from Japan. They're partially in, you know, Hawaii. They're in the West Coast. They're all over the United States, but they're also in like Brazil and other places that you may not think about that you would find Japanese people. You may find Chinese people. They may be in another country in South America and they have like a Chinese beauty pageant or something. That's something I came across in some of my courses, is that I don't know if there's a neat answer to that. I think all of these people from different parts of the world have different stories, different experiences. And so as people of African descent who arrived before slavery was abolished, the sets of conditions that we endured historically, politically, psychologically, is different. Right. It's different. And so, and then not knowing, for a lot of people, not knowing the language and ethnic group from Africa that we came from is an issue for people. And so reconnecting with that is something that's happening. I mean, that's part of the reason I've got at least a couple of people on here now that are associated with the Ewe people from southeastern Ghana, but they're also in Togo and Benin. And so I'm trying to reconnect myself with at least one ethnic group that I'm descended from. And lo and behold, I had enough evidence to say, okay, it's this one. And even if I'm wrong, the fact that I'm being accepted as, you know, one of us, we're one of the same people. That's important. So you may find multiple avenues for us getting back together. I see it a little bit differently because, you know, my participant observation involved just going to specific events. And so these events that I've attended, for example, for the Seminole, that's where the Seminole people are coming together at a particular place at a particular point in time. And so that is the connection.
Right. It's a cultural touch point.
It's a cultural touch point. Now, here's the other thing that I want to say about that. I think that part of it, you're kind of getting where I'm coming from. The other part is the sheer numbers of people. So do you have millions and millions of people who are, or do you have hundreds of thousands of people who are Black Seminole in the United States? You don't quite have those numbers. And so you have with Ethiopian people and Eritrean people, they have like thousands of people in Atlanta and in Houston and in Dallas, tens of thousands. Now, if you go to DC, you're going to see hundreds of thousands. Right. Same with Houston. You may have 100-something thousand people that are from Nigeria. So Nigeria and Ghana are the two biggest sending countries for Africa. And then Haiti and Jamaica are the biggest sending countries for the Caribbean. So when you find that you have thousands and thousands of them, then you've got multiple choices where you can find them. So for Ethiopia, you've got Seattle, Washington, You have LA, you have Atlanta, you have Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin. What else is there? Denver has quite a few. Toronto, Canada, things like that. Now, interestingly enough, with Ewe people, that's spelled E-W-E. I may be mispronounced a little bit, but you get the idea. So for those people, there's an association for North America. So you find Ewes that are in North America. They're in Canada as well as in various cities in the US, and we have an association in different cities. And then you have a national gathering or North American gathering, once a year. We have representatives from all of those associations come together. So what I'm suggesting to you is that maybe Seminoles may be doing a little bit of that already. It's just that the numbers aren't in the tens of thousands.
I appreciate that, because part of it, you see our event participation as we get bigger, people have families. You would think there'd be more people at events, but we also are spreading out more. And I'm just like looking for clues in other communities of what could bring us back together. And that's kind of the core of that question as we continue to search for that. So thanks for your answer and whatever you can provide now and in the future.
And, I want to say, and answer your question, Miko, I think one really beautiful example is the Lapon Apaches, who have repatriated to Brackett. Their story is, they were literally kicked off their ancestral homelands. And it's probably been about 10 plus years now that, they said, okay, well, if we have to come back, we're going to, buy the houses so that we have investment in the community. We're going to pay the taxes. So, there have been a number of them that have moved back to Brackett, and they've just Richard. I don't know if you met Richard, if you know Richard, Miko, Richard Gonzalez and Anita. He's the chairman of the Lapon Apaches. They just bought this historic home in Brackett, so that's just like a boss move,
Right.
They're gonna and if you follow him on Facebook, he's shown how they've been renovating it, and it should be ready. If not already, they're doing like a tour of home. So, what they're doing is amazing. They've moved back to their home. They've, they're integrated in the community, invest in the community. They're all the events, we can count on them to be at Seminole Days, to, participate in the parade. They used to put up teepees, to show their culture. But yeah, I think what they've done is amazing. So that's, one example of that. And then there are more that are moving back as well.
But part of it is reinvesting in a particular homeland area to give people a reason to come back and have a vested interest in that space.
Exactly.
It'd be like us buying back property on Fort Clark where our ancestors lived, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, just ideas floating. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Someone had a question on, what was this question? I saw it, then I forgot what it was.
It's from Liz Colvin.
Hey, Ancestry.
Yeah, when researching lineage, do you recommend AfricanAncestry.com before starting the Dawesville search as a freedman?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that a person can do. I haven't done that. I've heard people who've done it. I know that it's almost unanimous among the anthropology people that I've talked to around here. They don't trust it. Don't trust the samples that are available to try to do the comparisons. They question that, and they question the issues around privacy and confidentiality, because it's like, okay, you get your DNA so they can kind of like find out if your cousin committed a crime and stuff like that. So there's some concerns with it. But what I've heard from people who have used it, they feel like it's fairly accurate, that it gives you more than maybe what some of the other services provide. But I can't tell you firsthand what that experience is like. I know that the tests seem to, from African ancestry, those tests seem to be a little bit more expensive, but I've heard positive comments from people who've used it.
Hello, everyone. This is Wallace from Miami. I'm sorry about the painting and Jean's painting, and my computer doesn't I don't know, I probably need to do something to get my image back. But I thank you so much for sharing, Kevin, and for you sharing our program book and everything. That's very good. What we're trying to do at Loxahatchee is to get people to realize that for the Seminoles, Florida is a key place. This year, we're going to be talking about the Negro Fort that was in Tallahassee, up around Apalachicola, Tallahassee area, in that general area. And we're going to be doing a 2-day program, Saturday and Sunday. And so we want to get people to realize that the kind of thing you're talking about, we can't do at Loxahatchee because it's apart, but to getting people back together and recognizing where we're from and reclaiming our heritage and our history. Because at the time that one of the lecturers that we're going to have on Saturday, January, is Steele, Bill Steele, who was with the Seminole tribe of Florida. He did a lot of work with them. And he's done a book for the national parks about the African presence in Florida, and about the Negro Fort, and about how much we were significant to Florida history. And I think it's really important that we recognize, and when you said this about your color, not recognizing yourself as a Black person, and I talked about earlier the group in Mexico called the Negritos, were very dark people, and the Yamasee here and several of the Native American groups on the East Coast were dark-skinned people. So that we really, because of the Hollywood movie industry and lots of other things, the whole idea of the color of the Native Americans was never a big issue, but it becomes a big issue because they were not all looking like the Hollywood image, or they weren't all the same. And we really do, we have lots of issues that we have to work on. And one of them, of course, is the language that's used to talk about us. And we've got to take control of that language, and we talk about that referring to ourselves as slaves is not, it's not conducive, because people are not slaves, they are enslaved, and those people are whoever they were. And the terminology slave is a commercial term used by the enslavers, but it is not the term we want to use to refer to ourselves. So I'm saying, I'm mixing up everything that I'm saying, but I do invite you all to come to Miami, January 18th and 19th, to Jupiter, to West Palm Beach, at January 18th and 19th, and reunite, because these are our grounds. We believe some of the people at Loxahatchee may have come down from the Apalachicola area, from the area at the Tampa area to Loxahatchee. And some of those people we know were John Horse and some of the people who went out to Brackettville. So it's something that we all need to kind of reclaim and establish that this was our home first. And I thank you so much, Lonnie, for your support, that you continue to let us know you are supporting us. And we hope you can get to our event, if you will, in January. Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. We look forward to seeing you also.
Yes, I have a quick question. On Saturday, how early does everything start?
3 o'clock.
3, okay.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I hope you're there by 3 o'clock.
Yes, I'll make sure to be there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Tenney. Yeah. The one thing you said some things there. One of the things I did want to share, and Wendy and I sometimes have discussions off to the side on these kinds of topics, is that the tendency to paint, I mean color, to color all of the native people as red in skin tone. Well, you have the Inuit from the Northwest with some kind of we call Eskimo, whatever. They're lighter skin, and then when you get closer to the equator, just like everywhere else in Africa, I mean, people get a little darker as you get closer to the equator. So they're not all the same skin tone. They don't have all the same facial features. They have some similarities maybe, but I think that is a very important point to make, is that not all of them look like, you just named somebody, Sitting Bull. They don't all look like him. They don't all look like any particular representatives from any one of those indigenous nations. They don't. I mean, it's a diversity of people who were populating what we now call the Americas as well as the islands. So that is a very important point to keep in mind. Now, I don't know if there's been many anthropological studies that actually try to put all that together. We don't have photography to go on. Maybe you have some paintings, you have some sculptures, and you try to extrapolate from that what the people look like. But to suggest that they're all red men or red women is something that is oversimplifying the fact that there's so much diversity. In linguistics, they do a little bit better job with linguistics. They map out language families and things like that. But when it comes to the actual physical appearance of the people, that can become a big issue, especially when we're using appearance and also in almost like creating this idea that your worth as a human being is related to that. It's like we've really got some bizarre things that we're having to deal with. So I see your point. I appreciate that.
Okay, there are 2 questions in the chat.
Yeah.
The first one is from Eduzi. I hope I'm saying your name right. Eduzi Sala. So thank you for your insightful presentation, Dr. Johnson. I'm curious, in the course of your research, did you encounter challenges or nuances in navigating terminologies within Black communities, particularly among Afro-Indigenous individuals or groups? I imagine this might have been especially pronounced in the 19th or early 20th centuries, where certain groups or individuals might have used specific terminologies to further distinguish themselves, perhaps along class lines or within the broader Black racial identity. Beyond the broader classifications seen on public forums like driver's license applications, how did you address these distinctions in your work?
I'm going to start by looking at, I had something. Okay, so I want to read from you from the book called The Miseducation of the Negro. In the appendix of the version that I have, it talks about this idea of what do we call ourselves, for example. And so I'm just going to read this short paragraph, just to give you an idea. This question has been around for a long time. This book was written in 1933. So here you go. A participant who recently attended a historical meeting desired to take up the question as to what the race should be called: Africans, Negroes, colored people, or what? This is a matter of much concern to him because he hopes thereby to solve the race problem. If others will agree to call Negroes Nordics, he thinks, he will reach the desired end by taking a shortcut. So we can change the name and that just solves everything. That's the way that's written here in 1933. The idea that we're changing names. You know, when I was born, we were going from Negro to Black. And then in the late 1980s, then it became African American. So now it's Black or African American because there's not 100% consensus on what we call ourselves. So to answer your question, yes. And here's one of the ways that's more nuanced, that if you are around people from Ethiopia and Eritrea, you will find this thing happening. So in one of the quotes, I mentioned the term Abesha. So Abesha is sort of used in different ways, but the way I believe it is used originally is to apply to a language group that derives from the ancient language called Giz, G-E apostrophe E-Z, Giz. I may be saying it wrong. So from that, you get Amharic, you get Tigrinya, you get a bunch of different languages, including Guragi, which you mentioned in that song. So that group had somewhat, because it's a circuitous path that it took to get there, came up with this umbrella term, Habesha. Some people use it to refer to all people from Ethiopia, Eritrea. Now, the problem becomes is that some ethnic groups don't associate with that term because technically they're not from that language group family. So, for example, Oromo. So you're from Oromo, that's a different language family altogether. It's a Cushitic language, it's not a Semitic language. And so you find tensions like that, that people are using terms differently. Okay, so you do find that happens. I was asked a question in March. I went to the National Council for Black Studies conference. I did a presentation, and one of the one of the people in the audience asked me a question at the end, said, have you run across people from Ethiopia who don't refer to themselves as African? I'm like, no, I haven't run across that before. But afterwards, I had a conversation, and so the clarification was that the idea that maybe you got individuals that just prefer to be Ethiopian and not African, and you find stuff like that. Now, it can go varies from person to person, to individual, or you may find things like that happen between or across ethnic groups. There's all sorts of nuances, and sometimes I made the mistake many times, in like people who are from Eritrea, and I get used to saying Ethiopian. I ask them, what part of Ethiopia from? I'm from Eritrea. That happens. That's very innocent. But when you start getting into how you ask the question about what ethnic group you are, you have to be very careful about that. That some people don't like for you to do that. I'm not really from that community. And so I want to know what ethnic group they're from, but being able to approach it the right way becomes a challenge sometimes. It's almost like you have just talked to them and maybe they'll just tell you. So yeah, there's a lot of nuances like that happen. And you can get into, also the other thing is when you get into politics, then it gets even more complicated from there, because in Ethiopia, at least last time I talked to somebody, there's like conflict that's between certain political parties or certain ethnic groups in the government, and that's been going on for a little bit of time. It's shifted from one part of the country to another. So you do have the political things. I've run across with Eritrean people something really I was surprised me. So I'm in Houston. I'm trying to reach people from Eritrea, and I found out there's two associations. So I wasn't sure who to approach. So I'm go to either one of them. What I found out later is that in some cases, you've got some people that are from Eritrea that they like the government of Eritrea. There's some people who don't. And so then they get divided in terms of, no, we go to this church who likes it or don't like it. And there's all kinds of complexities that come up. And you have to basically the approach that I take is to try to be as neutral as possible. And then when I go to a festival and you have vendor booths and some of them are political, it's like, and they want your contact information. Like, no, thank you very much. No, I don't want to be on anybody's list. I know you guys got a war going on. No, please, no. So yeah, there's some things like that are very dangerous, potentially politically dangerous or politically ill-advised to get involved with. But so you become aware that those things exist, and then try to find the most, the best way to navigate those spaces. Yeah, and the other thing is, like, for example, I show you the green, yellow, red flag, right? The green at the top, yellow, then red. That's not the Ethiopian flag. That's not the state authorized flag for Ethiopia. The state authorized flag has a blue circle and it's got a yellow outline of a star in the middle. That is the official government flag. But you'll see at these festivals, there's a difference of opinion about the government. And so to sort of get beyond that, they maybe just don't put any symbol in there, because that is the way that they navigate their own space. I see that also at church events. I've gone to this event they call Mescal. This is the Search for the True Cross, an Orthodox Christian Ethiopian thing. And they'll have the green, yellow, red. There's no designated symbol for the government there because, you know, that's just the way that they have chosen to operate among their people. So there's all kinds of things like that. I'm sorry if I went on too long with that answer.
It was good. The next question is from your son. He said, since this was your life's work for the last few years, what are some of the biggest takeaways from your research in textbooks, in-person interviews, and going to events to seek cultural understanding of Afro-Indigenous peoples?
Oh, Afro-Indigenous people. I think the biggest takeaway for Afro-Indigenous people that I have is that as a broad category, it's just not understood. Indigenous people in general are not understood. They are stuck in Hollywood black and white movies, riding horses and shooting arrows and stuff like that. And it's the whole cowboys and Indian sort of scenario. They're forever fighting and, you know, forever riding a horse and stuff like that. Maybe shooting a rifle or something off the back of a horse and wearing feathers, you know, big headrests and stuff like that. So that's a very limited understanding of indigenous people. That's a very limited representation of indigenous people. They show up as mascots on sports teams and stuff like that. And that's cool. At least the thinking is that that's cool to do that. Without actually, and then also when we start talking about Native people, it tends to focus on, you know, what kind of, they wear moccasins, they live in teepees, and it makes all of them the same again. They don't all have that sort of housing structure. They don't all have the same sorts of apparel. And you know, the other thing that was a shock to me is like, what do you mean they didn't have horses till the Spaniards brought them over? That was another thing that's going on. It's like this was something that became more popular as more Europeans from Spain brought in horses, that this became more popular to have this horse culture. So just the Native people alone as a group, as they're represented in the United States, is very limited picture. And again, they all become red men and red women. And among the Cherokee, for example, and it came out in some of the interviews, is that this idea of a Cherokee princess comes up. And I kept hearing that over and over and over. People have this thing about it. There's a Cherokee princess that they're descended from or something. I'm like, if there's a princess, there's not a king, there's not a queen, there's not a prince, but there's a Cherokee princess somehow, which is really strange. So you have things like that to happen with indigenous people. Now, you want to add in the black or the African descended part in that mixture. It's like there's no clue that even exists as a real thing for many people that just not familiar with it at all. You know, I think my son, as best we know, is kind of maybe Choctaw on both sides. You know, we don't know much about that connection, but we do have for ourselves the opportunity to learn as much as we can about the indigenous people. You know, just be intentional about it. You have to go out of your way to find stuff out. And so that's what I have been doing. It's like going out of my way, because Michael knows we went to join the American Indian Center of South Carolina when we lived there. And I learned a lot about indigenous people and had an appreciation for the fact that although Black people have problems, in general, our big problems as Black people, they end up on the news. Whether people like what we're doing or not, some of our issues end up on the news. And there's Black people in Congress, there's Black people in the Senate, there's Black people in the House, there's a couple of Black governors here and there, there's the city council. And then you look at indigenous people, and in many cases, they don't have that. They don't have much representation in our federal government at all. But when you talk about Afro-Indigenous, that's just something that's just not really, that's not covered very much. And I would add this, and I'm going to close out this answer to my Michael, is that one of the things that struck me when I went in 2023 to Florida and had a discussion with people recreating the Battle of Loxahatchee, and it's like, you mean this was a village of Black people that came under attack? black, blacks, whatever you want to call, whatever the right term is, this village came under attack, and the people who were attacking them assumed that they were black people. And what do I really know about U.S. history if I don't know anything about Seminole? I don't know much at all about Seminole. I mean, I've done all this work. I know that there's a whole lot more to be known and studied, but the fact that I had no clue that there's like this village and it's got attacked by the army and other voluntary regiments, and they were trying to get the black people out of there because that was the key to defeating the Seminole, and these people fought back. I really have to question what I know about U.S. history, and I'll take it one more. I know I was going to stop, but the Alamo is another issue. And I say that because people don't know that the Alamo was Mission San Antonio de Valero. It had a name. It was a Spanish mission that eventually became something they called the Alamo. And the Alamo was not even what it was. The Alamo was just the company of these military people who came to set up shop there after it became, part of Mexico. It was like this. It just happened to evolve into that name. That's not the original name. That's not the original purpose. Was that this was just a place where these guys died, and that became the legitimacy for establishing the Republic of Texas, which was in part established to make sure that the preservation of slavery existed in this area, this part of the world. And this is stuff we're not taught. So to answer your question is I knew a little bit about the Alamo. I didn't know what the name of the mission was. So I just learned that while I was in this doctoral program, what that was. And then not knowing anything about Florida and not knowing about the Seminole, I question what we know about U.S. history. I just question it. I'm sorry, go ahead. I said, is there another question?
Let's see, Lonnie, are you able to speak?
Okay.
I see he's unmuted. Oh, still can't hear you. Yeah.
Wendy.
Yes.
It's Matt Griffin from Florida.
Hey, Matt.
Hey. No, I was just going to say too, since he mentioned the Alamo and stuff, down here in Florida when I do the presentations and reenactments and stuff, he mentioned not knowing about the Black Seminole village there at Loxahatchee and stuff. I think in my presentations, one of the things that I always talk about is one of the reasons why most people don't even know about the Second Seminole Indian Wars is because of the Alamo, because that kind of takes over the news cycle of that time era in 1836. So just a couple months after the beginning of the Seminole Wars and stuff. So that kind of, especially like with the battle there at Day Battlefield, I feel like that kind of took over the news cycle and stuff too. So I think when you study American history, like especially like when I was a kid doing social studies and stuff like that, that was kind of just the next chapter that you just went to. So you didn't really study the Seminole Wars and stuff here in Florida. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When I was in elementary school, I believe, I think I was in 3rd or 4th grade, that's when we started studying Texas history. And I think it was every other year we would have Texas history, U.S. history, Texas history, all up into high school. And that was the first year that I went on a field trip, and we went to the IMAX to watch the Alamo. So imagine watching John Wayne's version of the Alamo on this big screen. And, I always say, that was my first real indoctrination was remember the Alamo and celebrating Texas Independence Day on March 3rd. I can't not forget it. So, Texas, and I don't know how long they did that because I think I have 2 younger brothers who went to the same school as me. No, well, they went to another school, but I think my next brother, my next oldest brother went. Don't think my younger brother went, but yeah, for a couple of years, we all went to the IMAX to watch the Alamo. And, you get out of school and go watch a movie. So who's not going to love that? And then you think the movie is the truth. So yeah, that's always been so fascinating to me that we went to go watch this, and that was history for us,
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you making that connection between the Alamo and the Second Seminole Wars overlapping in time like that. It's like I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, I know those dates there, 1836, are right there, but I never really thought about it the way that you put it. That's very interesting. But another, just to share with everybody here is that when I lived in California for a little bit, then moved back to Houston, and I think it was the fifth grade or something like that. We had a play because you got the Go Texan thing happening. The Texas Independence Day gets celebrated, and so I had the distinct, I don't know if I should say honor, but I had the charge of in this play being the person playing Santa Ana. So I got to be the villain, the bad guy, and I had no idea what was going on, but it all came down to, I was the guy who had to lose because I was the bad guy. I didn't really understand Mexican history. I didn't understand Spanish history. And so that's one of the things to take into account is that there's so much to learn and so much that's taken for granted. Just like we're saying, we kind of like homogenize things. We try to oversimplify things and then leave out facts that are very important when we look at some of these things that we start looking at historically. So just keeping your mind open. And then the other thing is that, we are always learning new stuff. We learn from each other. I don't think we ever have it all, but it's good to come together and learn from each other and share, our perspectives. I'm sorry. Was that another question, Wendy?
No, I don't think there's another question. Let me see. Oh, Lonnie said the Alamo, don't go there. And Miko said, interesting, Matt G. I never realized the overlapping events of the Alamo and the Second Seminole War. Spot on. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah. So I think that's the end of the questions, unless there's anybody else who would like to ask a question. You're more than welcome.
Hey, Wendy, I don't have a question, but
but go ahead.
I do have a comment for Dr. Johnson. I believe your ME education is still I think it helped you in this particular journey that you're on. What I mean by that is that you understand configuration management. You understand the difference between the I-bomb, M-bomb, S-bomb, E-bomb. There's different levels and different details of configuration management. And the government, believe it or not, utilizes different parts over different programs using the same parts. In other words, there are several parts in the M1 that are the same, and there are several parts in the Bradley that are the same, even though they don't look alike, but they have a lot of commonality. And so I think that your ME education has helped you in this particular venture that you're on right now, Doctor.
I appreciate that. One of the things that I did during my qualifying exams, because I was asked a question like, what kind of scholar are you? And I had to come up with an answer so I could pass my qualifying exam. So I had to answer it right. I guess I could say I refuse to answer this question. No, I had to answer it. And one of the things that I did once I did some introspection is that, oh yeah, and so as far as coursework, yeah, when it came to math and stuff like that, I had no issues with that. I just had to figure out how to use it for statistics and things like that. So I wasn't intimidated by anything mathematically that thrown at me. But in thinking about what type of scholar I am, first of all, I had to be willing to accept that title in the first place. But then if I am a scholar, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I'm a social scientist. So what I did with that is says, I'm trying to explain people who have maybe two things at the same time. They have two races, two ethnicities at the same time. So I have two academic identities, two academic experiences at the same time. And so I use that to try to explain to myself, to explain to others why the phenomena that I'm seeking, how it can be addressed. It can be two things at the same time. It's not mutually exclusive. You can be, for example, black and white. You got a parent this, parent this, that. I mean, okay, who are you to tell me what I am? You're both of those things. Or it can be three things like that. You can be, I'm sorry, this is going to be obvious. You can be black and Asian, for example, right? And so this is not uncommon in the Caribbean. You have some Caribbean islands, especially like Trinidad, where you've got people of African descent and people from India that were brought in as sort of like indentured servant sort of situation. And we have a lot of people who are African on one side and South Asian Indian on another, and these are unique. So it becomes its own thing. Now, how does that individual navigate that identity? Because other people don't really know what to make of it. And so when I say I'm a mechanical engineer and I'm an anthropologist, it's like, well, why did you switch? Well, I didn't switch anything. I'm both of those now. It's just that right now, this chapter in my life, I'm focusing on the anthropology side, but I'm still an engineer. I still have students that I know I have friends who have daughters, and I have people I know on campus. They need help with math. I use my engineering to help them. They need help with physics. I help them. I like I mentioned in the profile, like I'm a member of the National Society of Black Engineers. I go to the meets when I can, and I mentor. And one of the people that was in that picture that I showed earlier from Ethiopia, one of those is my mentees. I mean, he's a mechanical engineer, and we're good friends and stuff like that. So it's not that I stop being one and start being the other. It's that you're both. You can be a dad and you can be a son at the same time. You can be many things at one time. It's just that what is it that is in focus right now? And it can change from situation to situation. So that was part of my theoretical thinking, is that the way that you express your identity, the way you experience your culture is situational. It depends on when, it depends on where, it depends on who's around and what's going on. I'm sorry if I went on too long there.
Hey, there is another question from a dear friend named Zara. And she says, congratulations on your PhD. Will you be in Florida later in January? Would love to ask you more questions in person, or if there's another way you'd prefer being contacted.
Oh yeah, I mean, when we can share the contact information
Yeah.
and everything. I think emails the thing that is easiest for me to keep up with.
Okay, yeah. So you can put in the chat here if you
Yeah, I'll just put that.
like.
Yeah, I'll put that in there. But yeah, I mean, I haven't decided. I was thinking about finding out more to see if I can make it. My situation is that I'm trying to find some sort of employment on campus, and I don't know what the requirement's going to be, but it wouldn't involve a Saturday, so that throws a whole nother opportunity thing at me. Yeah, so that's making me think that yeah, I'm definitely going to consider it. Let's put it that way.
Definitely.
And oh yeah, so and Wendy, if you remember, do you know about what goes with coffee? What
Oh,
little
that's
food
like my
goes with
favorite
coffee?
new thing. Yeah. That is my favorite
Yeah.
new thing. When you first, it was during the Seminole Maroon family reunion, what,
Yeah.
2 years ago, when it
Yeah.
was late at night and
Hmm.
you and Theodore Lush were sitting in the lobby eating popcorn and drinking coffee. And
Yep.
I thought it was the weirdest thing. And it
It
took
was
some
weird till you
convincing.
tried it.
Yeah, it was weird until I tried it. And I was like, this makes so much sense. So yeah, it's like my favorite thing now. I think it's so cool. But yeah, I appreciate you and I thank you for introducing that, because yeah, I never would have ever tried it. And I trust you. So I tried it.
Okay.
So there's
Somebody's a,
another
somebody's
comment
a,
from
somebody.
Zara.
Yeah, it says somebody's a master's student. Yeah, I
Mhm.
can relate to that. I understand. Yeah, yeah, I understand but but I think that's good that there's one thing is that going to school, whether it's undergrad or grad school, and you go in there, you're just trying to get through, just going through the class, you're just trying to pass and move on, get your diploma. But I think part of education is that you have an opportunity to learn stuff that, maybe it's what you're interested in, something may help you in life in other ways. I mean, I basically would make a confession that, and when I was in elementary school, and I started elementary school in California, and then came to Texas, the same thing held true in both cases. My most dreaded and hated, I would say hated with an H, course that they came up with was social studies. I hated that. It didn't make any sense. It was a waste of time. And it was just like, I would just guess, hopefully it would be a multiple choice test. I would just guess because it made no sense to me whatsoever. And then you know, I'm working on my undergrad degree and I took intro to sociology at the community college at night at work because I didn't want it to mess up my GPA and stuff. And lo and behold, somebody got to me and explained some sociology concepts where it made sense. And I fell in love with sociology and I wanted to study it one day in grad school. And then I did exactly that. And then that's the trail I've been on since, oh, good Lord, 2012. I'm sorry, go ahead. But the point is,
I think that was
but the
it.
point
Yeah.
is, I mean, the point I was making is that, you know, in reality, literally, I'm in school to learn. You know, that's it. I'm here. I don't have to have another degree. I didn't have to do this, but I wanted to learn, and by doing that, it has opened up me meeting some of the great people that you've heard from today.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy that I've met you because, you know, just in the work you're doing, which I think is so important. And Miko has a question. Oh, yeah.
I was
Yeah,
just
Miko,
saying,
what's
yes,
up?
I agree about meeting. That's
Oh,
all.
okay. I haven't seen that before. That's cool.
All
So
right, cool.
yeah. Well,
All right.
yeah. Does anyone have any closing remarks that they'd like to make? I'll ask that one more time before we close out. I know, Lonnie. We're gonna have to figure out what's going on with your microphone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I have
Yes.
thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And yeah, I mean, I will seriously consider Florida, but I'll be joining these sessions, you know, monthly, you know, when I can, of course.
Yeah, you've been a consistent participant, so I appreciate that very much too.
And learning more about ASC and all that stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. I can
I
say
know,
Dr. Johnson.
Dr. Kevin Johnson.
Yeah,
Thank you
y'all. I
so,
mean,
so much. Well, everybody
thank
have
y'all.
a very happy rest of the holidays. Merry Christmas to everybody. It's so cool that your son was on. I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah, and we'll be seeing you at the beginning of the new year with our next
Okay.
session, or in the new
All
year
right.
with our next session. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Y'all
Okay.
take
Take
care.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.